And she's been doing this work longer than I've been alive. I'm sorry, not to out you, you know. But then we had another facilitator who was a young person, and I've been organizing longer than she had been alive. So the Fellowship of Reconciliation, because of its long legacy, has the ability to bring 3 generations of trainers together to offer this kind of work to the next generation, right? And it's a beautiful, beautiful gift. And I wanted to start with that because I actually want to say a few words that might not be as easy to hear, but know that it's coming from that place of deep, deep respect that I have for each person in this room and for this organization as a whole. I want to acknowledge that some people in this room might have some unresolved feelings for some of the stuff that happened last year and in the years prior to that. Some of you may not be as familiar with it. I don't want to rehash it, but I just want to acknowledge that there's some feelings in the air that have gone unresolved. And it's important that those things, resolution and reconciliation sometimes takes its own time, right? But it's important that we talk about it so that it's not just this thing that's sitting and building up in ourselves as resentment. And because I'm aware of those kind of sensitivities to what happened last year, there's something that I wanted to talk about that I was hesitant to bring up. But we decided as a facilitation team last night that we've been talking about fierce vulnerability this whole weekend, and it would be completely inauthentic that if we didn't bring it up. There's a quote from a West African teacher named Malidoma Some that I deeply, deeply love. He says that conflict is the spirit of the relationship asking itself to deepen. Conflict is the spirit of the relationship asking itself to deepen. And during our facilitator check-in last night, there was a conflict that surfaced. Not a conflict within the facilitators, but a conflict that many of our facilitators were having with this group and with our community. And it would be a disrespect to our relationship if we didn't bring that to you. And so I really want us to ground in the fact that it's in that spirit of wanting to deepen with you all of our facilitators, wanting to deepen in relationship with you all, that we're bringing this to the table. Last night, one of the women in our group named that she had an uncomfortable interaction with one of the participants when an older man said made a comment basically expressing his affection of her, and it like landed on her a little weird. And then another person named that they had a similar experience, and another person named that they had a similar experience, and another person named that they had a similar experience. That the majority of the women and the non-male bodied people in our group had an experience just in the past 24 hours, specifically of having an awkward interaction with an older man that made them feel awkward, that made them feel unsafe, that made them question their role in this space. And that's a really difficult thing for me to hear. Right? Not just because I have deep love for all of the people in our group, in our facilitation group, but because I remember years ago, like the first time that it really landed, like really, really landed, how deep patriarchy is interwoven in every relationship, in every interaction that we have, not just at FOR, of course, but as a society. I remember years ago, the first time that it hit me, that my mother, that my 2 sisters, that every single woman that I've been close enough to have gotten to know and to know their stories have had a relationship with a man in which they were abused in some way or another. Every single woman I know. And when that when that realization hit me, like it was really tough to hold, because I know that I've been one of those people that have caused harm as well, right? And it like the thread keeps going, because it was years after that it hit me that it wasn't just like, oh, we need to undo patriarchy because we need to save all the women. right? Like, it hit me how broken I am because of the ways that I've been conditioned. And so much of nonviolence and fierce vulnerability is about this deep understanding of interdependence, right? That it's not just like nice words that we say when we say that we believe in mutual liberation. That undoing patriarchy isn't something that we do for women and non-binary folks, but it's something that we do for all of us to get liberated. And in order for us to get there, we need to really sit with the heartbrokenness of how prevalent this kind of harm is. And it's not just with gender, because in that conversation there were several things that came up around race that several of the people of color in our group experienced in this group as well, right? And just how prevalent it is for women and non-male bodied folks to walk into rooms and not feel safe. For people of color to walk into rooms and not feel safe. For young people to walk into rooms and not feel safe. And just how heartbreaking it is that we're so far from being able to build a world where we all genuinely feel safe and where we genuinely feel held, even though that's what we all in this room deeply want. I also want to, so much of nonviolence is holding this tension of the thesis and the antithesis. That for every belief or fact or statement, there's at least one other statement that is in contradiction to that, that's as true, right? Like, truth is not a zero-sum game. And so I want to acknowledge, we need to honor the harm that has happened in this space to the people in this room. And at the same time, acknowledge people know about microaggressions, right? I looked up a definition. One definition of microaggressions is a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority. And microaggressions, if it was just one thing, it wouldn't be that bad, right? But when we heard in our circle with facilitators last night, oh, I had that experience too, oh, I had that experience too, oh, I had that experience too. And hearing from people like Anthony, who's named in the past, that for a black woman to get up out of her house and walk to work is an act of nonviolence. Absolutely. Because of all that people have to experience, right? And so these things add up in a way that causes incredible harm. And at the same time, I'm a big fan of this guy named Jonathan Haidt, who's a social psychologist out of NYU. And he has this beautiful thing that he says about microaggressions. He says that microaggressions are a thing, and they cause real harm, and we need to be able to identify it when it happens, and we need to train people not to do it. And at the same time, the vast majority of the time, what we call microaggressions are not actually acts of aggression. And when we call them acts of aggression, it escalates the conflict in a way that actually makes it harder for us to have a conversation around what just happened. Right? As an Asian person, one of the things that we talk about a lot in Asian communities is this thing when people say, oh, where are you from? No matter how many generations we've been in this country, it doesn't necessarily apply in my case because I'm actually a first-generation immigrant, but people who've been, grew up in the States for 5 generations get asked, where are you from? I'm from Brooklyn. No, where are you really from? I'm from Brooklyn. Well, where are your parents from? Brooklyn. Where are your grandparents from? Ohio. No, but where are you really from? Right? And that kind of thing makes people feel like no matter how long they've been on this land, they will never fully be accepted. We're always going to be hyphenated. Asian hyphen American, African hyphen American. So that causes harm. But also to honor and acknowledge the fact that when someone asks us where we're from, it's oftentimes coming from a place of, I want to get to know your story. I actually want to connect with you. And we have to be able to hold enough nuance to understand that oftentimes these things don't come from a place of aggression and that it causes harm. So to acknowledge that people have been hurt in this space in the last 24 hours. Our facilitators have been hurt in the last 24 hours. And to hold the complexity that it was not an attempt to harm us, and we know that, right? And to hold both of those truths as equally true, as both 100% true at the same time. Right? And so we're not bringing this up to shame people in this room. We're not bringing this up to say that you all messed up and we're going to walk out and we never want to come back here. Right? That it's the exact opposite. If we're harmed and we didn't tell you, that would be a dishonoring of our relationship. It would have been easier to say, like, we're never going to see you all again, so we're not even going to bother having this conversation with you all. Or we're never going to see you again, so we're just going to tell you how badly you all messed up, and then just drop it and leave it at that. That's not what we're doing. Right? We're having this conversation because we want to deepen a relationship, and because this is an opportunity for all of us to learn. There's a friend of mine, Aaron Goggins, who oftentimes when he facilitates, puts up a group agreement, says, if we knew how to be free, we'd be there already. Like, if we all knew how to treat each other in a way that we all genuinely felt safe and heard at all times, we'd already be doing that. But none of us know how to do it. And part of the work of fierce vulnerability is being in touch with the heartbreak of that we actually don't know how to take care of each other yet. I went to a Buddhist retreat once, and there's a Buddhist nun that said, we have to learn to have compassion for people's ignorance. Because we are all ignorant, myself included, all of the facilitators. None of us know how to create beloved community, because we would have done that already if we did. And part of fierce vulnerability is grappling, having the humility enough to know that we don't know how to treat each other in a way that holds space, and we're going to continue to harm each other. And we're going to use every opportunity, every time that happens, to deepen in relationship. And so we're scrapping or adjusting part of the agenda today to have this conversation, because this is an opportunity for all of us to deepen and to move one step closer to beloved community. To hold the heartbreak that many of us in this room caused harm to other members in this room. Unintentionally, most likely, right? But to really hold that happened, and to know that we're all trying to create beloved community. We're all trying to create a world where we do all feel safe. And so what I want us to do is to spend a few minutes in groups of 3 with the people that are sitting around you, just to share a little bit about what might be coming up for you, and perhaps to think about a time that you might have said something, maybe with the best of intention, but that might have landed on somebody in a way that might have caused harm. Or maybe a time that, like, you heard a comment that you knew was coming from a place of like innocence and landed in some weird way. And I'll just share this one last story as it's coming up. The last time I got in a physical altercation was like 15 years ago, where my neighbor came down and called me that Asian guy. Like, I was taking a shower or something, so he told my housemate, it was like, hey, that Asian guy took my parking spot, can you make sure he comes up and talks to me about it? And I got pissed off, A, because our building didn't have assigned parking spots. So I'm like, what are you talking about? It's a first come, first served basis. But also, I went up and I punched the guy in the face. 15 years ago. We're all on this, like, journey of nonviolence. And I think back to that moment because I am an Asian guy. And so why did that piss me off so much? And I realized that, like, over time, it was because in that moment I stopped being Kazu. Right? I was every stereotype that existed of what it means to be an Asian guy. And when we don't feel seen as an individual, as a whole person, it's really frustrating. And that's oftentimes how these things happen. Right? Misunderstandings about race and gender and all the full complexity of all of who we are disappears when we're seen as, oh, that's a beautiful woman. And that's all she is in this one interaction that I'm having with her. Right? Or, oh, that's a person of color. I want to get their experience as a person of color and not as a human being. Right? And so just spend a few minutes talking a little bit about a time that you might have made a comment like that, or that you might have received a comment like that. And we'll come back together as a large group in I don't know, 6-7 minutes or so.
Thank you.